See, I'm already starting off poorly because I forgot to change the title on Twitch. Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub, and your moderator here at the Captain's Table. What is the Captain's Table, you may ask? Well, it is a show where I bring people from all over the Star Citizen universe to talk about Star Citizen. Today is an interesting show. It's going to be a more technical show, so I'm going to probably shut my mouth a lot because I don't know half as much as these two gentlemen do. So, both of which are extremely smart and technical-minded more than I am. But it probably won't just be a technical show. We'll probably talk a little bit more about other things as well, just because if we sat here and talked about server meshing for an hour, we're not Tony Z, so we don't quite... We won't quite captivate you as much, I'm sure. But with that being said, let's start off with SpaceCoder. SpaceCoder, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And where can they find you?
Hi, guys. I'm the SpaceCoder, or Quartermaster General, as Paul likes to call me sometimes. I am mostly known in the Star Citizen community for the Star Citizen Armory, which is a tool where you can preview gear, weapons, and equipment, and find where to buy it, what stats it has, and sometimes even what it looks like. We now have pictures. And I also do YouTube videos where I do all sorts of, I would say, theory crafting, technical stuff based on my experience as a Star Citizen backer for many, many years, and some knowledge that I've gained from the Armory, and so on and so forth. And I guess that's that. And where you can find me everywhere as the SpaceCoder, except Twitter, where I am the SpaceCoder1 because the SpaceCoder was taken. And if you would look in the chat on Twitch, that's the Armory. Go use the Armory. It's going to save you a lot of time.
I'll make sure to have it in the description as well for those of you watching this after the fact on YouTube.
Thank you.
Especially if you like FPS stuff, it saves you a lot of time. Have you updated it for 317 yet?
Yes, we have a P2 toggle for 317.
Sweet.
I think I turned it on. Hold on. Yes, I turned it on. Okay.
Okay. All right. Next we'll have, it's a newer face, but I'm sure many of you already know or have at least heard the voice. Mr. Ray's guy.
I think this is the first time anyone's seen my face on the internet.
On the
internet. My name's Daniel Raymond. I'm the voice behind Ray's Guide, and I've had a pretty varied career. I have a degree in architecture and then spent most of my professional career in computer applications in relation to architecture and facility management. I've kind of segued out of that part of career and been doing other things. And essentially, I did a little stint in college radio in broadcasting. And then as a Corona project is what I termed them. I had a few Corona projects. I built this sound booth. And then the next thing comes after that is, what are you going to do with your sound booth? And so I decided that I would start creating YouTube videos. And the idea behind them was that I felt there was a need for entertaining guides to this big universe. And so I came up with the idea of creating a character and doing in-character, in-game guides. And so I created Ray. Ray's kind of a space bubba, and I originally did Ray with a little bit too much full boom howl on him. He was a little bit difficult to understand, but then I was able to tone him down a little bit, and he's been a popular character in the verse with his adventures and misadventures and insights into the universe. And they're fun to do, but I also found that there was considerable also interest in, for lack of a better term, technical explainers. Kind of trying to be the Bill Nye the Science Guy of explaining things like, server meshing and quantum and et cetera, and offering my own opinions on that. And those have actually proven to be also very popular. And so, at least for the moment, I'm focusing on YouTube. And you can simply find it there as Ray's Guide. I also have a YouTube membership. Ray's Crew, and I've been very heartened by the response. This was actually one of two Corona projects. The other one just completely fell flat. But I may be doing other projects as well.
I mean, you're smart. You turned a Corona project into something that could make you money. My Corona project ended up being Warhammer miniatures. So I spent too much money. That's all I did for my Corona project.
Well, My other big Corona projects were building some furniture,
Mhm.
which I have in my house. Architects love to build furniture when they can't build a building. And the other Corona project was a patio cover with solar panels. And I can say that one paid off as well. I got a bit of sticker shock when I saw my last month's electric bill.
Mhm.
It was negative $45.
Hey.
Whole
My
different kind
Corona
of sticker
project
shock.
was getting my master's degree. And
Well, that's a pretty good Corona project too.
as everybody can tell, it's biting me in the ass right now. It's like, wait, we have to go to school in person now? That's not what I signed up for.
Awesome. Well, let's get started with the discussion, the discussion portion. As both of these gentlemen, well, before I say anything else, Ray, you and Morphologist need to get together and talk architecture. I'd love to hear y'all just talk about architecture for like an hour or so.
That would be fun.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll reach out. I'll see if I can get them to talk. So let's talk a little bit about server meshing, just in general, because it's a topic that's been coming up because CIG has been saying for the last several weeks, about a month or so, they've been talking about the road to Pyro. They've been talking about, like, the last monthly report said, insinuated that Pyro is planned for the end of the year. And as everyone knows, Pyro means server meshing. So the first question that I'd have on a more technical side of things for both of y'all, starting with you, Ray, is what do you think is left for server meshing to, like, what's left? What are the steps left for server meshing to be a thing, for them to even start adding it into the verse?
Well, that depends on your definition of server meshing. Much like everything else, server meshing has, for lack of a better term, what you might call tiers. The tier 0 server meshing is a static mesh with a very coarse grain.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, this coarsest grain would be one server for Stanton and one server for Pyro.
Mm-hmm.
And technically, that would be all they would need. And actually, technically, they wouldn't really have to do that in order for Pyro. It's just that the universe would become even more sparse.
Mm-hmm.
And also, one server for Stanton and one server for Pyro isn't going to let them test very much because whenever 4.0 hits, what percentage of the players are going to rush through the jump tunnel to Pyro? I think it'd be very safe to say something approaching 100% of them are going to go check out Pyro. And so you would have a Pyro server and a completely empty Stanton server. So in order to really be able to test a coarse mesh server, they're going to have to go a little bit less coarse than that. So there will probably be one server per planet will be the coarsest mesh that they would actually use for testing. Although technically they could release Pyro without it, but they just don't want the universe to feel that sparse. It already feels pretty sparse with one server for Stanton. And mostly what they need to do to get that is to have the replication layer be able to hand off between separate authoritative game servers, in this case, one per planet. Now, we don't know exactly what they're testing for 3.17, but they've obviously put in something in 3.17, starting about L, that broke everything, but had to do with object streaming, how things were streamed to your computer. Now, the safe thing to guess, I want to emphasize guess, is that what they put in was moving responsibility for streaming items to your server and to your client being from the replication layer, which is a collection of services. If that is in fact what they've got running now in 3.17, the main thing they have to work on is having separate servers for different planets and in having the handoff between them. Having the replication layer say, okay, now you have authority for this person versus someone else. But because, at least at the very coarse tier 1 server meshing, you've got this very long quantum travel period to accomplish the handoff. They don't have to have a really snap-second performance out of it like they will when serving and passing you off from one server to another will happen during a hallway from one room to the next. So that's the main thing they need to do in order to have a very coarse static server meshing ready. And it's both a big thing and just one thing, really.
Okay, so you're saying that it's like the handoff is the last thing that seems to that needs to happen, is the ability for the servers to be able to talk with one another, for the principal to say you're in charge of them now, you're there in charge of them, kind of thing.
Right, because both the servers are receiving the information about you from the replication layer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you had a pen and paper game, and at one table is the dungeon master handling the town, and the other table is the dungeon master handling the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this area of wilderness in between. And the replication layer is like the master dungeon master, who tells some things to the people at the one table and some things to the people at the other table. And then suddenly some guy gets on his horse and he's traveling across the countryside. And the replication layer is saying, okay, it's telling both the people at both tables about this guy running across the countryside. And then at some point in time, it says, okay, you there at the dungeon, you are now the authoritative person for this guy running across the countryside. And that's basically what is going to be happening with server meshing. The replication layer is going to start telling both, say you were going from Hurston to ArcCorp. It's going to be telling both the Hurston server and the ArcCorp server about you traveling through in Quantum Drive. And at some point, it's going to say, okay, ArcCorp server, you're the person I'm listening to about this ship. And that's really how you can have this handoff occurring very quickly, is because both servers already know everything about you.
Okay.
It's simply a handoff of which one the replication is now going to be listening to about you.
And that was what server-side OCS was for, right? Server-side object container streaming was the idea of it being streaming in and out information from these servers directly to the backend.
Well,
layers.
server-side OCS was more about, if nobody of the 50 people on my server is visiting some moon or a particular outpost, I don't have to keep that information about that moon or that outpost in my memory.
You can stream it out.
I can just sort of, I can forget about it. It's like, one thing I said in my video is like a tree falls in the forest, and if there's nobody on your server, does your server need to care about it? And the answer is really, they really don't. And so that's what server-side object container streaming was. It was just culling out all the things that your server didn't need to pay attention to because nobody that it was taking care of was there.
Okay. All right. I think I'm following along. Ape Brain is getting some of it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take this very complicated piece of technology.
What did I say about tinfoil hats?
And just kind of to lay this out there for anybody who's watching this who may be a little confused, it's also important to remember that all of the stuff he just talked about is probably dozens, if not hundreds, of different services and processes that are happening at the same time from different tools and other things that are going on. So there's nothing that's like there's no Lego block that says server meshing, and they just stick it into the servers and be like, you're done now. You know.
The replication layer on its own consists of dozens of services, and there are probably dozens of services involved with even your game server. It's just we tend to lump them all together because they're doing one sort of thing. But the character of modern programming is you pretty much do things in small pieces and implement those small pieces as services. Yeah. That makes it a lot more modular.
All right. SpaceCoder, your thoughts on what is left for server meshing? What needs?
I think Ray covered it excellently, but what I would add is, in addition to the code or the functionality that's going to transfer authority over entities between different servers, I think they also need to figure out a lot of issues regarding persistent state of entities. I know that they have this implemented to a certain extent with the entity graph and everything, but there are some issues that are going to be arising once we have larger shards that have multiple simulation servers where the actual game world is being simulated. Whether that's going to be a static or dynamic mesh, doesn't matter. But let's assume that there's going to be a period of time where we're going to have shards that have X number of simulation servers happening at one point. But we're still going to have an Y number of shards that are going to simulate the same universe. So we're going to have, whatever number of instances of Stanton and Pyro and whatever systems. So the question is how we're going to decide who goes into which shard and how we're going to maintain persistent state of entities and players between shards.
So not to cut in here, but that sounds like the matchmaking service that they talked about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the matchmaking service is responsible for the who goes where.
Yeah.
And that you're going to be with your friends. And I don't understand how exactly they meant that, because that would... The dependency graph on trying to get friends of friends of friends into one server is horrifying, quite frankly. But what I'm more concerned about is kind of maintaining the long-term persistence between different shards. So, like, if I do something with my ship in one shard, then let's say that shard stops existing because no one's going to be playing on it for a while. So then I'm going to... If I log back in, is it going to spin back up that original shard because that shard has my persistent state? Or is my persistent state going to transfer to a different shard? Now, the question is, if the transfer is going to be happening, how is that going to happen? Because they're CIG, by creating these tiers of server meshing, like Ray said, they're creating more hurdles for themselves to solve before we get to the actual server meshing. And then obviously, I'm pretty sure we're missing a bunch of other services on the way to actual server meshing. Like, we know we have some sort of replication layer in place right now. We know we have the simulation. So we know that air traffic control is going to be its own service. I don't know if that's 317 or if that's going to be pushed. I think it's going to get pushed because it was on the roadmap. Now it's not on the roadmap anymore. We now have quantum being implemented in some limited sense into Star Citizen. That's a separate service. Quantum is a separate service. It's actually multiple services. It's a service that runs the invisible simulation, and it also is the service that runs the virtual AI, and then it's the service that runs the AI that you actually meet. And we have some of these, and some of these are still missing some features. And then we also have, I don't know if it was the Tony Z video or if it was the CitizenCon panel, they were talking about having I don't remember what they called it, but they were talking about having a routing layer between all of this that's going to decide what goes at what point. And I don't think they have that implemented yet, at least from what I understood from that video. So that's another thing they're missing. And then I think they're also going to hit some issues that we're not seeing yet on the road to actual server meshing. And I think that about covers my completely unorganized concerns about the whole issue.
So what I'm gathering is that you're the like one of the concerns you're having is in terms of like how is CIG going to handle persistence between shards?
Yes.
And
the question is, like, if something happens in one shard, like let's say if a tree falls in one shard, is that change going to propagate to the other shards, or are shards going to be independent the same way servers are independent right now? Because if you put a box in a building in an outpost currently in Star Citizen, it's going to stay there for as long as that server is alive. Mm-hmm. Once that server gets destroyed, it's no longer there. It's now going to propagate to other servers. So are shards going to behave the same way, or until it's all just one shard, obviously? Or are they going to be independent instances of Star Citizen like we have now?
I mean, I know the plan is that they're going to have some sort of fluid idea between them, but I guess the question is also, when will that happen? When will they be able to figure out?
I mean, when is the big question of Star Citizen?
Yes. So, but the question is more: is that going to happen at server meshing tier 0? When they first implement that into the game?
I don't think so. I think the first iteration of server meshing is going to be more about getting more people into one shard so that the universe is more alive. Because right now, 50 players per server, you don't really meet a whole lot of other people unless you go to the cities or to the stations, or you go to a well-traveled outpost, or there's an event going on that's forcing people into one spot. So I think what they're going to be trying to do is improve performance and make sure we can have more people in one shard. And then they can go on and do Pyro, they can do other systems. Because, if you have Stanton and Pyro and you have 50 people in a server, once that initial push into Pyro normalizes, you're going to have, either kind of a normal distribution of people, or you're going to have more people in one or the other, but no one's really going to be meeting any other people. So I think first they would have to actually raise the player cap significantly, possibly into hundreds, to actually make it seem like a living universe.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess that'll go into another question I'm going to add in for both of y'all for this one. Do you think this first implementation of server meshing is going to increase the player cap? And if so, do you think what is your expectation in terms of
my expectation is you will probably be having 50 player shards, at least at the start. When they launch 4.0, you will have probably 50 player shards, because they're going to be predicting that everyone's going to go to Pyro and everyone's going to go up to Ruin Station. And until they are sure that they can handle, and until they can get people to spread out more across more of the servers, to really increase the player count, you've got to have the ability to do a dynamic mesh. Mm-hmm. Because without that, you've got to set your shard count based on the idea that everybody's going to be going to one server. So let's say everybody's going to be going to, say, Lorville. If Lorville is one server, that's going to be, and you don't have any ability to further subdivide it, that's going to be the thing that limits you. Yeah. Now, when you get to a dynamic server mesh, they can suddenly take Lorville and divide it into 5 zones. And then if everyone decides to go to the CBD at Lorville, you can take the CBD and divide it into 3 or 4 zones. When you can do that on the fly, now you've got something. I don't think
that's necessarily true.
You can trust it to have a larger shard.
Go ahead.
I think, splitting zones, I don't think they can do it that dynamically. I think it's still bound to object containers. So assuming they at creation create small object containers, because object containers can be nested into each other. You can actually, if you look in the game files, you can actually see what object containers look like and what's inside of them. Fun fact. And I think the actual server meshing, like one server can operate an object container and its subcontainers. So I don't think they can, split things into rooms unless, make a room a server, unless that room is its own object container. And some rooms are actually their own object containers, but most are not. Like I think outposts are object containers, the moons are object containers. Lorville is 2 object containers, I think, roughly. So I don't think they're ever going to get to that point where they're going to be making subsections of object containers, because I don't think they can stream, separate parts of object containers in and out of the server. They can unrender them on the client. That's a pretty common thing with games. But I don't think they can just stream them out of the server. I think it still needs to be on that object container level, but that's only my assumption.
Do you think they might add more object containers? So, like, for instance, with Lorville, there's really 3 places in Lorville, or, well, I guess more than places. You've got the landing zone, you've got the, like, kind of the habitation area, and then you've got the central business district. And then, of course, you also have the gates on each side.
6 gates.
Yeah.
I don't think if they will do it, but I know that they can do it.
They can do it if they wanted to.
Yeah, if they realize, like, oh, okay, we have, let's say we have 1,000 players per server in this hypothetical scenario. And let's say a lot of these players are congregating in the central business district in Lorville for trading. And it's lowering performance because we have to simulate the entirety of Lorville because it's an object container. So, okay, let's make central business district its own container. Let's make the Habs their own container. Let's make the Spaceport their own container. And now those things can be their own servers, and that's going to improve performance. And I think they could subdivide even further, but that would just, I think, bring more issues, because the more containers you have, the more transfer of authority you have to do, and the more communication there has to be. So, like, let's say you have the station in the CBD is one container, and then the actual building is another container. and you have, dozens of players running back and forth, every minute, just doing their trading, trying to get on and off trains. That's, that threshold is going to be problematic, I think. Unless, they find a way to make that transfer of authority extremely fast and efficient. I have no doubt they could do that, but
you can't beat light speed though. So
yeah,
that's going to be the upper limit.
So I think they have to create the object container splits in places where you're not going to notice it as much. Like you said, there's a lot of quantum, or there's a train ride. You're not going to see a little bit of desync when you're in a train because you're probably tabbed out looking at Reddit. Let's be honest. So
Ray,
I went off on a tangent there,
but the goal, if I understand what CIG is trying to create, is that, let's say we're talking about, Lorville CBD. You might have one server that's handling the main lobby and another server that's handling the what was it, trades and transfers. Now, even if those are both part of the same object container, you have two servers both being served from the replication layer, that whole same object. So if I'm the server handling the transfers area, I know about the geometry of the lobby, but doesn't put a lot of strain on me as a server. But with server meshing, they might say you don't have to know about the people that are in the lobby. You don't have to know about what the people in the lobby are doing. But as soon as one of those people start to go up the stairs and down the hallway, then the replication layer would say, okay, you people over in the transfers, now you need to know about this person that's now in the hallway. And then somewhere during that time that you're walking through the hallway, they'll say, okay, transfers server, you're now the authority for that person I've been telling you about. That is my understanding of how it's going to be working. And so it's not like you're going to be seeing a blip, because the replication's also been telling you about your movement through the hallway. So what's going on is just behind the scenes, that one little binary that says you are now the authoritative server. And I'm hoping if they get the performance going right, that can happen within one server tick.
Okay. Wow. That's pretty fast. That's like a millisecond usually, right?
That's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But that's why one of the fundamental things I said in my video is that a shard is always going to be limited to one Amazon data center.
Yeah.
Because the communication between the entity graph database, the replication layer, and the dedicated game servers, there's just tons of information, and lag has to be sub-millisecond. If lag gets to be more than sub-millisecond, you're going to have problems. But that's why I'm thinking it can happen, because the two machines are literally in the same room.
Yeah.
They're literally next to each other. So you have sub-millisecond pings. And that's what you're going to have to get any two processes work that quickly, that smoothly, that often. And
that's actually a good point on having these microservices. It's great because you have smaller code base. It actually did it to the Armory not so long ago, where it's a bunch of small services now, and it's lightning fast. But the problem is, once you're trying to kind of mush all the data and all the functionality into one kind of user-facing endpoint, let's call it, where Star Citizen is a user-facing endpoint, you're going to be encountering synchronization issues, especially if you need data from multiple services at once. And in most cases, in commercial application, it's not going to matter that much. But in a game where you need real-time information, and you need it right now and you need it always, it's going to be a problem. And I think Ray is correct in saying that all these services for one shard will have to be in the same physical building, which shouldn't be a problem for Amazon to do. However, it might be interesting to set up.
Star Citizen is barely a blip on Amazon Web Services radar. It runs so much the computing power of the internet right now. But what it does mean is that the people that are hoping that there will be a single global shard, and that you're somehow going to be able to take something like the replication layer and spread it around servers all around the world, and you're going to be able to have within the same shard dynamic game servers spread all around the world. You're going to be able to have the entity graph database in real time spread around the world. You're just not going to be able to do that because those three main components of a shard have to be talking to each other at sub-millisecond pings, latencies.
SpaceCoder, your thoughts? Do you think we're going to see more than 50 people per server, though, in this first iteration?
I think I'm gonna have to agree with Ray. We're probably not in the first iteration, but I think very closely after, because that first iteration of server meshing is what will allow us to have more players. But we will have to see whether that's going to perform well, how our players going to behave, more importantly. Like, if everybody's just going to fly on over to Pyro or it's going to be in Stanton, there's no point. Because just one of those servers is going to be unloaded permanently, pretty much. But, once things kind of normalize and people, start going on about their normal lives, I think then we can start seeing, an increase in player caps.
Okay, Ray,
but yeah,
I agree. And in my last video on server meshing, I didn't even talk about the network part of it at all, and said the other challenge of server meshing is going to be that CIG is going to have to change their attitude from how do we get people together for events to how do we spread them out.
Yeah.
How do we get them spread out all around Lorville? Get them spread out all around Stanton, get them spread out all around Pyro so that the dynamic mesh or even a static mesh could work. So typical example is that right now, if someone wants to do trading at Lorville, they have to come to one room. And and once you start having larger server counts, that's the last thing you want to do. You want to give them lots of different places around Lorville, maybe even just in their hangar where they can do trading, so they don't have to all come mashing into this one room.
I just realized that the new derelicts and looting and stuff might actually be kind of a prelude to spreading people out.
Right. And like if you're going to have an event like Jumptown, which I suspect once they have Pyro running, Jumptown feels more like a Pyro event than the Stanton event in the first place. You're not just going to try to be sending everyone to one drug lab. That's an invitation to a disaster on a 1,000-player server on Shard. No, you're going to have drug labs all over the place, and based on some sort of algorithm, you say, okay, you are told to go to this drug lab, you're told to this drug lab, you're told to this drug lab, and you can have the same event, but you're not trying to send 1,000 people to one drug lab.
Yeah,
and for clarification,
people are still going to do it.
Yeah.
They will do it just to mess with the server. And so there's going to be a user education factor to this as well. And that CIG is going to have to be honest and say, if you try to bring more than, 75, 80 people to one location, your client is going to drag. And we can't do anything about that as a server. If you bring 80, ships to one location, your client, not the servers, your client is going to drag.
I think this is the point where I remind everyone that when med guns came out, there were people all over the place drugging people to death.
Yeah.
BTU. Yeah.
I think this is a good point in time to make that point.
So
never underestimate mischievousness of players.
So this brings me to another point. Do either of you, and I guess I can start with SpaceCoder on this one. Do either of you believe that we're going to see stacked layers or like mesh servers? So like when you have that 50 players per server and then the 51st person walks in, you have a static server, that suddenly they step into a room which is supposed to be full and they're empty. So they just kind of spun up a new one and put it on top of it like that. Because I know they've talked about that in the past. Do you think they would try something like that? Or
I know they talked about it in the past, but in the CitizenCon demo, and then I think there was a question asked on Spectrum where they didn't directly say no, but they implied that that's not what they want to do. But the question is, if that's not what they want to do, what are they going to do? Because that's, to my knowledge, that's kind of the industry standard for doing this kind of thing. So, it's a maybe. I'm going to go with a maybe on this one. Because I can't think of another solution, but they have also implied that they don't want to do that.
Yeah. I would suggest it only as a last case, last ditch effort because it creates
Yeah.
so many persistence and internal consistency problems.
Yep.
Now, there might be occasions where that would work. One of them that comes to mind is Cluster Prison.
Mm.
You could have, 50 different cell blocks of Cluster Prison, and they just look all the same, but they're different cell blocks.
Yeah.
And so the cell block you're put into in Cluster Prison could be a matter of layering, but that would be only something like that as an exception. And that would work, but you have to really think that it's going to be the exception rather than the rule.
The rule. So based off of what I've heard, or you're saying what I've heard for CIG, this is just kind of last thing before we move on from this topic to the next topic, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some non-server meshing stuff, which is from what I'm gathering is we should be expecting, both of y'all should are expecting that server meshing when it first comes in will likely be max cap of per server basis. So for instance, if they have a mesh of say each planet in Stanton system, so there are 4 servers or 5 servers, one for the universe and then one for each of the planets of the Stanton system, that each of those servers will have can hold a maximum of 50 people. So that shard that holds that mesh will be a maximum of 50 people in that shard. Is that right?
It's in the nature of CIG to start small and then slowly inch the numbers up, and that's what they're going to do.
Okay.
And they're gonna. It's not just gonna be the player cap. It's gonna be the number of servers in the mesh. They actually said it in the CitizenCon demo that they have to optimize cost because servers cost money. CIG is a huge corporation and they make a shit ton of money selling JPEGs, but servers cost money. So they're going to try to find the sweet spot between performance versus number of servers versus number of players. And I think they're going to experiment with this. I think they're going to try and make it in a way where the number of players and number of servers is going to be something very easily customized within the settings of the whole shard. But yeah, I think initially we're going to see probably something like, oh, okay, it's a mesh of 2 or 3 servers and you can have 50 people in here.
Okay.
They might have an intermediate step where they have a manual dynamic mesh, whereas they can split a server and they can combine a server, but they'll have to have someone there 24/7 managing it. But that I can only see them doing that for a very short period of time. Now, to clarify, I think some people might misunderstand the previous statement. We're talking about virtual servers here, not physical boxes.
Yes,
but even those do cost money to have Amazon have one spun up, even if it isn't doing anything.
Yes,
which is why dynamic is so important. Because the dynamic, they can spin down servers if they're not using it. If no one cares about that tree that fell, they could spin down that server that was holding that tree, and they just don't have to pay for it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The typical way you would program is you actually have like a bench of servers, and you say, get up, get in the game, or get out of the game, and then so they have a small pool because that's always quicker than spooling up a copy of DOS in a virtual server right from zero. So you'll have a bench of idle servers.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the last topic of server meshing, and then we'll move on to some more quantum discussion and other things like that. So
yeah, we have already put everyone to sleep.
I think chat's very, very. I'm very intrigued. I'm learning things. I'm processing things that I've learned, and
we're teaching a historian how to do tech.
For me, a tech is this a flint arrowhead or is this a bronze arrowhead? That's the question for me.
Well, I've been around in tech long enough. I feel like both a tech guy and a historian. I sometimes joke with folks that I'm the Rosetta Stone of dead computer languages.
Hey,
here's how you did that in Fortran.
Something's gonna happen like the only thing that can save humanity from an oncoming disaster is someone who knows a computer language that was coded in the 70s
Someone can actually still decode a line of
can
APL.
still code, yeah. And they're going to call you up and just be like, hey, we need you right now. We have no idea what we're looking at.
We're sending a helicopter. This is the reason I have been considering learning an old programming language.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
just because someone's going to have to fix all the banking software eventually.
Well, something like the IRS, I think, still uses like a bunch of. No,
I'm sure there's legacy COBOL in the IRS and in most banks.
I think they use mainframe computers still for the IRS still. So I mean, like old style, 80s, maybe early 90s sort of technology and coding or software. So,
in about 3 months, I'm going to be working for a banking corporation. So just ask me in 3 months on how things are.
They won't be asking you to do the COBOL. They've got some old guy that they're hoping will never retire doing the COBOL.
Probably. But yeah, I have sold my soul officially. I'm sorry, they found me through the armory. They got me.
Hey. There we go. All right, so the next question is pretty short, I think, for the answer. So start with you, Ray, on this one. Do you think that server meshing still has a shot releasing this year?
Static with a very coarse grid, it's definitely possible.
So you're not like yes, it's going to happen. It's more of a,
Here's the thing. And this is what a lot of people didn't understand about the old roadmap. Something got on the roadmap because it had a 70% chance of completion.
Mm-hmm.
But if this requires this, which requires this, which requires three things, all requiring each other, and all of them have a 70% chance of succeeding, their actual chance of making it across the finish line is about 30%. All right. And so the reason why I'm not really positive is because I understand that there's lots of cross dependencies, and it really only takes one of them to hold the whole thing back from the finish line.
So we're talking about the bus problem, but instead of the bus problem being with people, it's the bus problem being with technology. If one step along the path gets hit by a bus, and suddenly you're out, you have to figure out how to go along without it,
Right. Or if the bus can't leave until all 6 people are on board and only 5 of them are on board, the bus isn't leaving.
All right. SpaceCoder, your thoughts. Do you think it's a chance that it's going to happen this year or not?
I'm going to have to agree with Ray. It's certainly possible. Like in the infinite entropy of the world, it is absolutely possible that server meshing is going to happen this year.
Would you let me put it this way. Would you bet on it at this point?
Probably not.
No?
Never bet on tech.
This is a callback to my Delays Explained video.
Mm-hmm.
Star Citizen is a dependency nightmare. Everything depends on everything. The teams are all over the place, and they are all working on multiple things. There is no way to resource plan this. CIG may be pretending that, we have planning meetings at the start of every quarter. Sure, you can have planning meetings, but you're never going to figure out what's going to happen when. So, and if one person is not on the bus is not leaving. And I think that's what's going to happen. Like, they're going to be like 90% done. They're going to have everything in place except 1 or 2 things that are just going to get delayed by something. And that's going to roll over into the next quarter. And now you're kind of chasing that delay on top of the things that were supposed to get done that quarter. And we're already pushing a boulder in front of us of things that were not done in the previous X number of quarters.
Mm-hmm. Good, Ray.
And I think that's what's actually behind all the changes in the roadmap.
Yeah.
Is that they didn't want to be disappointing people about when 4.0 is going to come out. And so what's going to happen is we're going to continue to see, like we did with 3.17, releases that start small and then grow at the end versus our usual pattern, which was to see releases start large and then keep shrinking to our disappointment.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is it's some release, whether it's 3.19, 3.20, the sixth person is going to get on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have, hello, welcome to our weekly roadmap update. We're adding the following things in the next release. We're adding server meshing, pyro, jump tunnels.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, it's now 4.0 and it's going to Evocati tomorrow.
Yeah. That's a Chris Roberts comes on camera and
Chris Roberts come on camera and says, we're vindicated.
Yeah.
Who's saying scam now, buddies?
Mm.
So even then you're gonna see Twitter articles being like, "Oh, Star Citizen finally releases
after 11 years." Yeah,
the haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
At some point, they will be the mother of all roadmap updates, and they'll happen right before an Evocati on a release.
Okay, because I've been in my back of my brain. I've been thinking about something like that. Like the back of my brain, it's been 319, the Citizen Con, because Chris Roberts is a showman. So anything that can be delayed to Citizen Con will probably be delayed, and something to the effect of, like, I've been talking about salvage, which is like I'm sure salvage is good, and I'm sure it'll get close to being finished, and someone will go, yeah, but it could go to Citizen Con, and we could make it a little bit better if it goes to Citizen Con. And everyone will be like, yeah, we really want to make sure it's really good and good for the... No one's going to say we're going to delay it for Citizen Con because it'll look better, but it'll always just go, but we could use some more time to polish it. We could use a little bit more time to work on it. And it's that close, possibly. In my head, that's what I've figured. And Chris Roberts would never, if he could manage it, he would never pass up the idea of standing up on a Citizen Con stage and saying server meshing and pyro is now in PTU.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, it deserves that kind of speculation.
They'll be having that planning conversation, and Chris Roberts is going to be sitting there. He's going to slam down a shot of tequila, and he's going to fuck it, we will do it live.
Yeah.
And I'm suspecting the same thing about Squadron 42.
Yeah.
I mean, if they could come up and show a live running subsection of Squadron 42 or announce it's gone to beta or something, they would love to do that at a Citizen Con. But again, you can't. They've been chastised too much for promising what they can't deliver, and so I don't think they're, as much as it would be fun and exciting to do it at a Citizen Con, I think they have learned from past experiences. Do not show up at Citizen Con with a sandworm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I have to say, like, this year's Citizen Con was a little bit more tame with the demos and everything. I think they have finally learned.
Right.
I think, but they haven't.
Been a bit chastised.
They look like they have.
But hey, it's in Los Angeles. I'm gonna. it's a freeway drive.
There we go. I
hope it is.
I no longer live in California. I live in Texas. So otherwise, when it was last in LA, I lived in San Francisco. So it was just like, hey, I can. It's an 8-hour drive and a hotel visit. I don't have to get on a plane. So. All right, let's move on to the last topic, because we're kind of running out of time here for this first section, which is, I guess we'll just talk about quantum, because I know you've talked about quantum. I want to talk about quantum. I'm sure TheSpaceCoder wants to talk a little bit about quantum. How big is it that quantum is being added into this 317 patch? TheSpaceCoder, we'll start with you, then we'll move on to Ray.
It's huge. I mean, it doesn't do much right now. The only thing it's actually changing right now is the cost of ship services. But when you think about it, that's just their way of testing the supply-demand model and the supply-demand simulation in Star Citizen. And eventually, that's going to branch out, and it's actually going to start affecting commodity prices. It's going to start affecting security activity. It's going to start affecting your pirate encounters. I think this initial implementation is just kind of their way of like slowly like dipping their toes into how it's going to work, how it's going to interact with the players. Because right now, I don't think players can actually change the behavior of quantum that much. I think CIG have purposefully restricted this, because players, if players could affect it, it would immediately break.
If players knew where it was, they would break it, because we like to break things because we're players. That's what we do.
But it's an important first step in kind of delivering that simulation experience, that living universe that we were promised so long ago. And actually just seeing the technology come online after Tony Z was talking about it, just seeing that come online, that's exciting for me. Plus, they do it in C#. I'm a C# developer, so maybe in like a year and a half or something, I'm going to apply for a job at CIG again.
There you go. Ray, or Den, go ahead.
I've had, frankly, I'm in the process. I've already recorded the voiceover and am editing the video for something about the player experience of Quanta in 3.17. And the fact is, if you don't know what you're looking for, you have no idea what how to see anything. The one way in which players, I believe, might be able to affect Quanta is that in 3.17, we're in a lot more of these combat assistance missions. And I think they're being generated because a quanta, a trader quanta runs across a pirate quanta, and that generates the mission. So it might be, however, we have no real way of knowing, that if people start taking a lot of those missions, they'll pacify a section and prices might go down. But that's my main thing. My main trouble with all of Tony Zurovic's talk is that there's very little consideration of how the players see this. So, for example, it affects the price of gas, of quantum fuel. But I can call up Google Maps and say gas stations. It's going to show me a map and what the price of unleaded gasoline is everywhere around me. You don't have that. Not even anything that simple. It's not even that you can drive by,
A station with a
Hardcore
little
Panel
signs.
1, and there'll be a sign up front saying quantum $6. You can, one way in which quantum shows up that you can kind of measure is that if you're a Starfarer, there's an auto price button.
Mm-hmm.
And if you click that auto price button, it'll give you pretty much a different price every single time. So some wheels are turning around and behind the scenes that is setting that price. But if you wanted to go someplace else to get a better price, you have no way of knowing. Similarly, it affects the price of repairs, and repairs will cost you a lot more in 3.17. Just warning folks about that. But there's no way that you can see what this repair to your ship is going to cost at L1 versus at Bajini Point. The only way to know is go there, land, click the button, and then see how big the damages are. But you're not going to be taking your damaged ship from station to station to station to see who's going to give you the best price on repairs. So there is very, very little right now that is user-facing about Quanta. And
I think that's something we'll have, that we will see in the future, but not.
Has anybody talked about it? Tony Z has these talks, but he never mentions, he shows all these great tools that they're using to see what the Quanta are doing, but he never talks about how we are going to see what is happening, how the economy is dynamic. And unless players can actually see what's going on, where the hot spots are, where the cold spots are, where the expensive spots are, where the cheap spots are, from their standpoint, it might as well be a random number generator.
Yeah.
I mean, if I land and then find out what the price of damages are, price of repairing the damages, does it matter really to me if there's 100,000 bots running around in the background figuring out what the price should be, or if it's a random number generator? Really, from a player standpoint, it's pretty much the same. It just feels, it could be a random number generator. So there's a lot of work, whether it's done by Tony Z and his team or by someone on the UI user experience team, which actually might be the better people for it, to actually think about how do you make this dynamic, living, breathing economy understandable as a decision support system to the players.
Okay. Yeah, because
I say this on every show. CIG, we need an API for this data. If you give me a case of beer, I'm going to make it my own damn self.
That's true. Somebody will, but then you've got situations where you have to leave the game in order to play the game, which is not the immersion they're looking for.
Yeah. What was I going to say? There's two conflicting sides that I've seen at CIG about this, which is one, they don't want players to know real-time, up-to-date information about commodities because they don't want players to know that in the far-off system 4 systems away that the quantum price, quantanium price is high while they are in where they are because, at real-time, up-to-date because of information lag. They want to build an information lag for things like data running. But at the same time, people will just build tools to do that if you don't, even if it's just point a camera at the trade terminals, you know.
Right. But at a minimum, you should be able to do what you can do in Google Maps.
Yeah.
You know, say gas stations and see what the price of unleaded gasoline is around, or Google repair costs and show all the dots and what the regular cost of repairs are there. Now, if they want to say within Stanton you can't do that for Pyro, that makes sense because that information does have to take a while. But you from a fun standpoint, if you don't provide them that in the game, they're going to find some way of doing it out of the game.
Do you think?
And I mean, you can always have kind of the option for players. Obviously, you can do it two ways. You can see this information. Let's say you can see information about prices of commodities, prices of fuel, prices of repel. But let's say that the price of the adjacent system that you see is off by X amount of percent. And if you go one system further, that price is even further off. So yeah, it might be cheaper, but there is, give or take 20% on that price. Or alternatively, you can say, oh, you can't see the price, but hey, you can pay, I don't know, 1,000 credits for information about price that's this old. And that kind of creates options for data runs because you can say, oh, download trade data from Stanton, you fly over to Terra and you sell the trade data there and you're going to earn some money. And then people are going to be able to buy that information. That way you have information and you also protect data running. Well, I guess.
Beyond that, though, if you're in Stanton and you're looking at fuel prices in Pyro, by the time you get to Pyro, those fuel prices are going to have changed anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's already an information lag, and that the prices you're going to see at the other end aren't the prices you're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Because that too will be affected by quanta, and that's actually one of the good things about quanta is that things will and should be, but it needs to be presented to it. Really, the first game I ever played that had a really good decision support system in it was Railroad Tycoon 2.
Yes.
I mean, that's how long. I don't know. Did you play Railroad Tycoon 2? But you had this map, and it was, you could look at the continent, and it was shaded from green to red to yellow based on the prices, and there were little green triangles for the points of demand, sources of supply, red triangles with points of demand, and how tall they were was how much the size of demand. And there were little box cars that represented the actual current movement of things. And you could take one look at it and say, that's where I need to run my railroad. And they need to have something like that where you can call it up, look at the demand, high prices, supplies, and say, that's where I need to run my cargo ship.
Okay. So effectively what you're saying is what they have with like the commodity journal updates, but just like in an app.
Oh, well, the problem is with the commodity price index is that it's this unsorted list.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to look at it and get any sort of a conceptualization about what's really going on.
Yeah.
And there's a particular problem with it, at least as of 3.17p, as far as fuel prices are concerned. And that is that the first significant digit is the thousands, and they round it to the hundredths. So it's like you'll see 6 places with, let's say they're giving away fuel for free, 0.00.
Yeah.
When in fact the real price is like 0.004 or 0.003, and it's just rounding it down. Whereas a place right next door that says it's 0.01 might actually be 0.00, something that 6 that rounds up to 0.01. So that's just careless. They should have changed the units of measure.
They change some decimal point. Yeah.
Make a price per thousand. That's all you have to do. But the fact that sort of thing is happening is just that there's not a whole lot of attention being given to how all this massive complex engine of bots results in something that players can play with.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's nice that we have this fancy, super advanced simulation, but it's unclear how we can interact with it and how we can view the massive, because this simulation, it generates a massive amount of data. That's the whole point of quantum, to generate data. But there is no way for us as players to view that data and to create our own takeaways from that data, to see what is the demand, what's the supply, what's the demand, where to go to do what. And that's something that I think we're gonna have to wait for a very, very long time, because they first have to get Quantum to a point where they're happy with the functionality and they're happy with the data it's generating, and then they can pivot to try and figure out a way to present that data to the player. And until then, we're just gonna have to figure out our own ways to do that.
But think about the number of videos we've seen of Tony Z describing Quantum, what's going on behind the scenes, and how little we've heard about anyone talking about what they're coming up with, whether it's Tony Z or someone else, about how they're going to present that to us in front of the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely need, I'm one of those people who's like, if you look at the MOBA glass, it's ancient. Like I have a request that I want the MOBA glass to be as useful as my phone. I can take my phone and move applications away from the home screen, move it into different folders and those sorts of things. If I pull up my MOBA glass, I should immediately be seeing the only things that I care about in terms of applications, because I don't care about where all my stuff is. That's not something I'm going to look at on a regular basis. But I should be able to have like my bank account, be able to send money, my inventory or my personal inventory or context, mission details. I should be able to customize that at least a little bit. And I think that's honestly probably one of the problems, is that we don't even have a really functioning MOBA glass yet for what the game will need, let alone the quanta information, because that's its own, that's an economy simulator. Because you're right, no one cares if you have a bunch of bots running in the background until those bots affect gameplay. So the key is to how do you take this cool technology and turn it into gameplay rather than just something that Tony Z can win an award for at a GDC,
Well, I don't want to minimize the usefulness or the sophistication of econometric modeling. My brother-in-law would, beat me up if I did that.
No, it's great, and what he's doing is not. I would say it's important for people to remember to know that what Tony Z is doing is not something that's new. Economists and computer engineers have been doing stuff like this since the 80s, since before that, since they did it on punch cards. Like, it's something that they've been wanting to do for a long time. The difference is that Tony Z is taking a lot of the technology and going, feed it into a video game. What's going to happen? Which has not really been done before, because nobody cares about in that sort of universe. I'd imagine there's not a lot of crossover between. I'm an economics teacher, so I know a lot of...
The way you could describe it is, let's make a video game for our economy simulator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And basically econometric modeling has boiled down to algebraic, basically, solutions that just use formulas. And then this kind of simulation model, which just use a large number of bots. And it's very sophisticated what he's doing. But ultimately, we need to be able to play with it.
Yeah, it needs to be a game.
Yeah, they have to figure out a way to turn this technology, this service, into value for players. Because it does have value to us in a behind the scenes sense, and it's going to have a lot of that value. But we also need to find value that's going to be, on the scene, value that we're going to be interacting with, features, information, that kind of stuff. And what am I drinking? It's called bitter lemon, I think.
Okay. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I hate to end it, because I'm sure we could all sit here and talk about this for hours. But
I would have to get drunk for that.
Yeah. let's wrap up the discussion.
We need to spike our lemonades.
Yeah. Let's wrap up the discussion, move on to the question and answer session. So I'm going to wrap up the video. Thank you. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Make sure that you are following and subscribing to Ray's Guide and TheSpaceCoder. Make sure you check out the Armory. Make sure that is it youtube.com/Ray's Guide? Is that what it is?
It's a channel on YouTube. So just search for Ray's Guide. Once
Ray's
you're in
Guide
the
on
YouTube interface, it should pop it right up.
I'll have the link in the description for those of you on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, if you want to join us live and ask your own questions as we move on to the question and answer session, we do this live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. GMT, 11 p.m. UTC. And you can come join us live as well. And yeah, like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.